Marcus Chun had always believed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their stubborn refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. Standing in the cargo bay of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, watching the swirling blues and purples of hyperspace through the viewport, he never imagined that belief would soon be tested in ways that would reshape the galaxy. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Marcus gripped the nearest support beam. Through the viewport, the planet Zephyria Prime materialized like a jewel against the starfield. Its surface gleamed with crystalline cities that caught and refracted the light of its twin suns, creating rainbow auroras that danced across the atmosphere. It was beautiful, alien, and utterly unlike anything humanity had ever seen. "First time seeing a Zephyrian world?" asked Captain Sarah Rodriguez, stepping up beside him. Her weathered face carried the kind of experience that came from years navigating the dangerous politics of the Galactic Council. Marcus nodded, unable to tear his gaze away. "The photos don't do it justice." "Nothing could," she agreed. "The Zephyrians have been building those crystal cities for over 10,000 years. Each generation adds new layers, new patterns. They say if you know how to read them, the cities tell the entire history of their civilization." The young diplomat finally looked away from the viewport. At 28, Marcus was the youngest member of humanity's diplomatic corps ever assigned to a first contact scenario of this magnitude. The Zephyrian Empire controlled nearly a third of the galaxy's trade routes, and their decision to either accept or reject humanity's application for Galactic Council membership would determine whether his species would thrive among the stars or remain isolated in their small corner of space. "Nervous?" Captain Rodriguez asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. 6 months of preparation, learning their customs, their language, their history, and I still feel like I'm going to make some catastrophic mistake that dooms our entire species." The captain smiled. "You know what I learned in my 40 years of dealing with alien species? They're not looking for perfection. They're looking for sincerity. And if there's one thing humans excel at, it's being genuinely, sometimes painfully, sincere." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "All Diplomata personnel to the main conference room. We'll be docking in 20 minutes. As they made their way through the ship's corridors, Marcus reviewed what he knew about Zephyrian society. They were an ancient species, humanoid in basic shape, but with skin that shifted through different hues depending on their emotional state and social rank. Their society was rigidly hierarchical, ruled by a queen who was considered the living embodiment of their planet's spiritual essence. The royal family, particularly the crown princess Lyrelii, were said to possess abilities that bordered on the mystical. The conference room was already filled with the rest of the diplomatic team when Marcus and Captain Rodriguez arrived. Ambassador Catherine Hayes, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, stood at the head of the table studying a holographic display of the Zephyrian capital city. "Listen carefully, everyone," Ambassador Hayes began without preamble. "Intelligence suggests there are factions within the Zephyrian court that oppose humanity's inclusion in the Galactic Council. Some view us as too aggressive, too unpredictable. Others see us as primitives who achieved spaceflight too recently to be trusted with galactic politics." She gestured to the hologram, which zoomed in on a massive crystal palace that seemed to grow directly from the planet's surface. "Our meetings will take place in the heart of Zephyria, the royal palace. We'll be guests of Queen Seraphina and her daughter, Crown Princess Lyrelii. Remember, every word, every gesture will be analyzed. The Zephyrians have a concept called spirit reading. They believe they can sense the true intentions of other beings through subtle energy patterns." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What if they sense our desperation? Humanity really does need this alliance. "Then, we'll be honest about it," Ambassador Hayes replied. "The Zephyrians respect directness, even if they don't always appreciate it. What they cannot tolerate is deception." The ship shuddered again as it entered Zephyria's atmosphere. Through the conference room's viewports, They could see other vessels in the sky, sleek, organic-looking ships that seemed to flow through the air like living creatures. Some were clearly Zephyrian, their hulls shifting through the same color patterns as their creator's skin. Others belonged to species Marcus had only read about. The insectoid Kythera with their geometric black ships, the gaseous ethereals whose vessels looked like contained clouds, and dozens of others representing the vast diversity of the Galactic Council. Remember, Ambassador Hayes continued, Princess Lyralii will likely be our primary contact. She's being groomed to eventually rule the Empire, and her opinion will carry enormous weight with the Queen. The intelligence reports describe her as brilliant, compassionate, but also incredibly perceptive. She studied Earth culture extensively and speaks perfect English, among dozens of other languages. As the ship descended toward the landing platform of the Crystal Palace, Marcus found himself wondering what the princess would think of humanity. Would she see them as potential allies, or as a threat to the careful balance the Galactic Council had maintained for millennia? The landing was smooth, barely a whisper of contact as the ship settled onto the crystal platform. Through the viewports, Marcus could see figures approaching, tall, elegant beings whose skin shifted through shades of deep blue and silver. Their movements had a fluid grace that seemed almost like a dance. "Time to make history," Captain Rodriguez murmured. The diplomatic team made their way to the ship's main airlock. Marcus took a deep breath, tasting the recycled air one last time before stepping into the unknown. The airlock cycled, and then the doors opened to reveal the alien world beyond. The first thing that hit him was the scent, something like ozone mixed with flowers he had no name for. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy, and Marcus felt a tingling sensation across his skin. The crystal platform stretched out before them, its surface carved with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. Waiting to greet them was a delegation of Zephyrians, their skin displaying formal patterns of deep purple and gold. At their head stood a figure who could only be Princess Lyralii herself. She was taller than Marcus had expected, perhaps 6.5 feet, with the characteristic elongated limbs and graceful neck of her species. But it was her eyes that captured his attention, large, luminous, and a shade of violet he had never seen before. Her skin cycled through subtle hues of blue and silver, and her hair, if it could be called hair, seemed to be made of fine crystalline threads that caught and reflected light with every movement. "Welcome to Zephyria Prime," she said, and her voice carried a musical quality that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest. "I am Princess Lyralii, daughter of Queen Seraphina, heir to the Crystal Throne. We are honored by humanity's presence." Ambassador Hayes stepped forward and offered the traditional Zephyrian greeting, pressing her palms together and bowing slightly. "Your Highness, I am Ambassador Catherine Hayes, representing the United Earth Government. We come seeking friendship and mutual understanding between our peoples." The princess's skin shifted to warmer tones, a sign of approval Marcus remembered from his briefings. "Your reputation precedes you, Ambassador Hayes. The Queen is eager to meet with your delegation. But first, allow me to show you something of our world." As they walked across the crystal platform toward the palace, Princess Lyralii fell into step beside Marcus. "You are the youngest member of your delegation," she observed. "This is unusual for your species, is it not? I understand humans typically defer to age and experience in matters of such importance." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. "Yes, Your Highness. I'm here because I specialize in xenocultural studies and learned your language. But honestly, I sometimes wonder if I'm qualified for something this important." The princess's skin brightened to a warm gold, and Marcus caught what might have been amusement in her expression. Honesty. How refreshing. Most species send only their most polished diplomats, beings who have practiced every word until all spontaneity is lost. Your admission of uncertainty shows wisdom, not weakness. They passed through an archway that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal, its surface etched with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Beyond lay gardens that defied every rule of botany Marcus knew. Plants with leaves that chimed like bells in the breeze grew alongside flowers that glowed with their own inner light. Streams of water flowed upward in impossible spirals before cascading down in shimmering waterfalls. "Your world is incredible," Marcus said, unable to hide his wonder. "It is the result of 10 millennia of harmony between our people and the planet's natural energies," the princess explained. "Every Zephyrian is born with some degree of sensitivity to what you might call the life force of our world. We shape our cities and gardens not by imposing our will, but by finding patterns that already exist in the planetary consciousness and amplifying them." They entered the palace proper through doors that stood 50 feet tall, made of crystal so clear it was almost invisible except for the rainbows it cast. The interior took Marcus's breath away. Corridors stretched impossibly far in every direction, their walls alive with shifting patterns of light. The ceiling soared overhead, lost in misty heights where flying creatures that might have been birds or might have been something else entirely moved in graceful formations. "The heart of Zephyria," Princess Laurelii said, gesturing to encompass the vast space around them. "It has been growing for 10,000 years, shaped by the will and dreams of every ruler who has sat upon the crystal throne. They say that sensitive beings can hear the voices of all who came before, echoing through these halls." Marcus tilted his head, listening. For just a moment, he could have sworn he heard something, a whisper of voices in a language he didn't recognize, speaking words that nonetheless seemed to carry deep meaning. "You heard them," the princess said, and her skin shifted to a tone Marcus couldn't identify, surprise, perhaps mixed with something else. That should not be possible for an off-worlder. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, their procession was interrupted by the arrival of another Zephyrian. This one was clearly of high rank, their skin displaying complex patterns of deep red and black. Unlike the fluid grace Marcus had observed in other Zephyrians, this being moved with sharp, aggressive gestures. "Your Highness," the newcomer said, their voice carrying an edge that needed no translation. "I was not informed that the humans would be touring the heart before their formal audience with Her Majesty." Princess Laurelii's skin darkened to a steely blue. "Lord Vax, the customs of hospitality require that we show proper courtesy to our guests. Surely you do not object to following our ancient traditions." Lord Vax's coloring shifted to deeper reds. "Of course not, Your Highness. I merely worry about security concerns. Humans are known for their aggressive tendencies." Marcus felt the entire diplomatic team tense behind him. This was exactly the kind of prejudice they had been warned about, but encountering it so directly still stung. Before Ambassador Hayes could respond, Marcus found himself stepping forward. "Lord Vax," he said, attempting the formal pronunciation he had practiced for months. "I understand your concerns. Humans do have a history of conflict, just as every species struggles with its nature. But we're here because we want to grow beyond our limitations, to learn from civilizations like yours that have found paths to peace." Lord Vax's eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Pretty words, young human. But words are easily spoken. What proof do you offer of your species' sincerity?" The challenge hung in the air like a blade. Marcus was aware of everyone watching him, the diplomatic team, the princess, the other Zephyrians in their party. This was not how first contact was supposed to go according to any of the protocols he had studied. "The only proof I can offer is what we do from this moment forward," Marcus said. "Our actions, our choices, our willingness to listen and learn. Judge us by what you see, not by what you fear we might become." For a long moment, Lord Vax stared at him in silence. Then, the Zephyrian skin shifted to a pattern Marcus didn't recognize. Complex swirls of purple and gold that seemed to move across his surface like living tattoos. "Interesting," Lord Vax murmured. Most humans would have responded with anger or defensiveness. You offer vulnerability instead. Perhaps there is more to your species than the reports suggest. Princess Lyraliai's skin had brightened to warm golds and blues. Lord Vayax, if you have no further concerns, I would like to continue showing our guests to their quarters. Lord Vayax inclined his head in what was clearly a dismissal rather than deference. Of course, Your Highness. I look forward to observing these humans more closely during their stay. As the Lord and his entourage departed, Princess Lyraliai turned to Marcus. That was well handled. Lord Vayax commands significant influence among the noble houses. His initial impression of your delegation could have consequences for your entire mission. Did I pass? Marcus asked, trying to lighten the mood. The princess's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a warm amber. You surprised him, which is no small accomplishment. Lord Vayax prides himself on being able to predict the behavior of other species. Your response was unexpected. They continued through the palace, and Marcus found himself walking closer to the princess than strict protocol probably dictated. There was something about her presence that put him at ease, despite the alien grandeur surrounding them. She pointed out architectural details and historical significance as they walked, but Marcus found himself more interested in the subtle changes in her skin tone as she spoke, the musical quality of her laugh when he asked particularly naive questions about Zephyrian culture. Your delegation will be housed in the guest harmony, she explained as they approached a section of the palace where the crystal walls took on a warmer, more golden hue. These chambers have been prepared specifically for human physiology. Atmosphere, gravity, and temperature have all been adjusted for your comfort. The guest quarters were magnificent. Each room was carved from living crystal that had been shaped to provide both beauty and functionality. Windows looked out over the city and the alien landscape beyond, while the walls themselves provided a soft, warm light that seemed to respond to the occupant's presence. The formal audience with Queen Seraphina will take place tomorrow at the rising of the second sun, Princess Lyraliai informed them. Tonight, you are invited to join the court for the evening harmony, a traditional gathering where different species share aspects of their culture. After the princess departed, the diplomatic team gathered in Ambassador Hayes's suite to debrief. The ambassador sat at the room's single desk, making notes on a datapad while the rest of the team arranged themselves on the crystalline furniture that somehow managed to be both alien and surprisingly comfortable. Initial impressions? Ambassador Hayes asked without looking up from her notes. The princess seems genuinely interested in establishing positive relations, offered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's xenosociologist. Her skin patterns consistently displayed what our research indicates are positive emotions during our interactions. Lord Vayax is going to be a problem, added Commander James Park, the team's military liaison. He's clearly testing us, looking for any excuse to recommend against humanity's admission to the Council. Ambassador Hayes finally looked up. Marcus, you handled that confrontation well, but it was risky. We can't afford to have team members going off script. Marcus felt his face flush. I'm sorry, Ambassador. He was basically calling humans savages, and I couldn't just stand there and let that go unchallenged. Actually, Dr. Vasquez interjected. Marcus's response might have been exactly right. Zephyrian culture values what they call spirit truth, authentic emotional responses rather than calculated political statements. His genuine reaction probably carried more weight than any prepared diplomatic response would have. Captain Rodriguez nodded agreement. I've seen it before with other species. Sometimes the unscripted moments are what really matter. Ambassador Hayes considered this. Perhaps, but we need to be careful. The stakes are too high for improvisation. She turned back to her datapad. Get some rest, everyone. Tomorrow we meet the Queen. Marcus made his way to his assigned quarters, a circular room with walls that seemed to pulse gently with soft blue light. The furniture was minimal but elegant, a bed that appeared to be grown rather than built, a desk carved from the same crystal as the walls, and a large window that offered a breathtaking view of the Zephyrian capital. As he stood at the window, watching the city's lights shift and dance in patterns that seemed almost like communication, Marcus reflected on the day's events. The princess had been nothing like what he had expected. The briefings had described her as brilliant and perceptive, but they hadn't prepared him for her warmth, her genuine curiosity about humanity, or the way her presence seemed to calm the anxieties that had been plaguing him since the mission began. A soft chime from the door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, he found a young Zephyrian servant holding an ornate crystal container. "From Her Highness, Princess Lyralii," the servant said in accented English. "She thought you might find this interesting." Inside the container was a small plant unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Its leaves were translucent, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with a gentle rhythm. As he watched, the leaves began to glow with a soft, warm light. Attached to the container was a note written in flowing script. "This is a harmony bloom, native to the gardens of the heart. It responds to the emotional resonance of those around it. I thought you might appreciate having a piece of our world in your quarters." Marcus found himself smiling as he placed the plant on his desk. The harmony bloom's glow intensified slightly, as if responding to his mood. Outside his window, the twin moons of Zephyria were rising, casting the crystal city in silver light. Tomorrow would bring the formal audience with the queen, and with it the real beginning of humanity's test. But for tonight, Marcus allowed himself to hope that perhaps, against all odds, this mission might actually succeed. The harmony bloom pulsed gently beside him. Its light keeping time with his heartbeat. Marcus woke to the sound of crystal chimes echoing through the palace walls, a hauntingly beautiful melody that seemed to resonate from the very structure of the building itself. The harmony bloom on his desk had grown brighter overnight, its silver veins now pulsing with soft gold highlights. Through his window, he could see the first of Zephyria's twin suns cresting the horizon, painting the crystal city in shades of rose and amber. The formal audience with Queen Seraphina was set for the rising of the second sun, still several hours away. Marcus dressed carefully in the ceremonial diplomatic uniform that had been specially designed for this mission. Deep blue fabric with subtle silver threading that was meant to echo the formal colors of the United Earth government, while showing respect for Zephyrian aesthetic sensibilities. A soft knock at his door announced the arrival of breakfast, delivered by the same young Zephyrian servant from the night before. The meal was an artful arrangement of foods that had been analyzed and approved for human consumption, fruits that tasted like combinations of flavors that had no earth equivalent, grains that seemed to dissolve into pure energy on the tongue, and a beverage that looked like liquid starlight, but tasted surprisingly similar to green tea. Her Highness requests that you join her for a walk in the Dawn Gardens before the formal proceedings begin, the servant informed him. If you are amenable, she will meet you at the Harmony Gate in 1/4 hour. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. A private meeting with the princess before the crucial audience with the queen could be either an incredible opportunity or a dangerous complication. Either way, he couldn't refuse. The Harmony Gate turned out to be an archway carved from what appeared to be a single massive gemstone, its surface faceted in ways that caught and scattered the morning light into thousands of tiny rainbows. Princess Lyralii was waiting beneath it, her skin displaying gentle patterns of morning gold and soft blue. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from the same crystalline material as her hair, creating an effect that made her appear almost luminous in the early sunlight. "Good morning, Marcus," she said, her musical voice carrying a note of genuine pleasure. "I hope you slept well." Sometimes off-worlders find their first night in the heart unsettling. "I slept better than I expected, actually," Marcus replied, falling in a step beside her as they entered the gardens. "Your gift helped. The Harmony bloom seems to have made itself at home in my quarters." The princess's skin brightened noticeably. "They are sensitive creatures. The fact that it has accepted you so readily speaks well of your inner harmony. Many Zephyrians struggle to cultivate them successfully. The Dawn Gardens were a marvel of living architecture. Pathways of polished stone wound between beds of flowers that seemed to sing in harmony with the morning breeze. Trees with silver bark and leaves that chimed like distant bells provided shade over secluded alcoves where benches grew directly from the ground like organic sculptures. "I wanted to speak with you before the formal audience," Princess Lyralii said as they walked. "There are things you should know about the court dynamics that your briefings may not have covered." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "What kind of things?" "Lord Vax, whom you met yesterday, represents a faction that believes the Galactic Council has become too inclusive. They see the admission of new species, particularly younger civilizations like humanity, as diluting the wisdom and stability that the Council has maintained for millennia. They paused beside a fountain where water flowed upward in impossible spirals before cascading down in sheets that created rainbow curtains in the morning light. Princess Lyralii trailed her fingers through one of the water curtains, and Marcus noticed that where she touched it, the water took on a faint golden glow. "There's more," she continued. "Queen Seraphina is unwell. She has been for several cycles now. The court physicians believe it may be a natural progression of her age, but some whisper that it's connected to disturbances in the planetary harmony. As her heir, I've been taking on more responsibilities, but my authority isn't absolute yet." Marcus absorbed this information with growing concern. "What does that mean for humanity's application?" "It means the decision may ultimately rest with me," the princess said, her skin cycling through deeper, more complex patterns. "And it means that every interaction you have during your stay here will be scrutinized by those who would use any misstep to argue against your species' inclusion in the council." They continued walking, entering a section of the garden where the plants seemed more alien than decorative. Towering structures that might have been trees or might have been living sculptures stretched toward the sky, their surfaces covered in patterns that shifted and moved like slow rivers of light. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. Surely sharing internal court politics with a representative of a species seeking admission is against protocol. Princess Lyralii stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Her violet eyes seemed to look right through him, and Marcus felt that same tingling sensation he had experienced when first stepping onto the planet. "Because last night, when you spoke with Lord Vax, something extraordinary happened," she said. "You spoke with what we call spirit truth, complete honesty, without calculation or artifice. In 10,000 years of Zephyrian history, there have been perhaps a dozen off-worlders capable of that level of authentic communication." Marcus felt his cheeks warming. "I was just being honest. It seemed like the right thing to do." "Exactly," the princess said, her skin brightening to warm golds. "You didn't calculate the political implications or consider how your words might be received. You simply spoke from your heart. That kind of authenticity is incredibly rare, and it's something my people value above almost everything else." A new sound reached them from somewhere in the distance, a low, harmonious humming that seemed to come from the very air around them. Princess Lyralii's expression grew serious. "The queen is beginning the morning attunement," she explained. "We should return to prepare for the audience." As they made their way back toward the palace, Marcus found himself walking closer to the princess than strict diplomatic protocol probably warranted. There was something about her presence that seemed to quiet the nervous energy that had been building in his chest since waking. "Princess Lyralii," he said, then paused, unsure how to phrase his question delicately. "Ask," she said simply. "Honest questions deserve honest answers. When you look at humanity, what do you see? Really, I mean, not the diplomatic answer you'd give in court, but what you actually think of us." The princess was quiet for a long moment, her skin cycling through subtle hues that Marcus couldn't interpret. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a thoughtful quality. "I see a species standing at a crossroads," she said. "You have achieved remarkable things in a very short time. Space travel, complex technology, art, and literature that shows deep emotional sophistication. But you're also still struggling with the same conflicts that have plagued you since you first developed consciousness. Violence, prejudice, the tendency to see difference as threat rather than opportunity. Marcus felt his heart sink. So you think we're too primitive for the council? No, the princess said firmly, her skin flaring bright gold. I think you're exactly what a council needs. Your species hasn't learned to hide its nature behind layers of civilization. When you feel joy, anger, hope, fear, it shows. That honesty, that refusal to completely suppress your more basic emotions in favor of cold logic, could bring a vitality to the council that we haven't seen in centuries. They had reached the palace entrance, and Marcus could see other members of the diplomatic team gathering in preparation for the audience. But he found himself reluctant to end this conversation. There's something else you should know, Princess Lyralii said quietly. The queen's illness, it's not entirely natural. There are those in the court who believe that Zephyria itself is crying out against what they see as the corruption of our ancient ways. They think admitting more young species to the council will anger the planetary consciousness and worsen her condition. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. And what do you believe? The princess's skin shifted to complex patterns of deep blue and silver, colors Marcus was beginning to recognize as indicative of serious thought. I believe the planet is trying to tell us something, but not what the traditionalists think. Zephyria has been isolated in its perfection for too long. Perhaps what it needs is the chaos and vitality that younger species like yours could bring. Before Marcus could respond, Ambassador Hayes appeared at his elbow. Marcus, we need to begin final preparations. Your Highness, she added, offering the traditional bow to Princess Lyralii. Of course, the princess replied, returning the formal gesture. I will see you all on the throne of harmonies shortly. As the diplomatic team made their way to their quarters for final preparations, Marcus found his mind racing. Everything the princess had told him painted a picture far more complex and dangerous than their briefings had suggested. Humanity's fate might depend not just on making a good impression, but on navigating internal Zephyrian politics that he barely understood. An hour later, the diplomatic team assembled in full ceremonial dress. Ambassador Hayes had chosen to wear formal robes in earth blue and silver, while the rest of the team wore variations of the same color scheme. Marcus caught his reflection in one of the crystal walls and barely recognized himself. The formal attire somehow made him look older, more serious, more like someone who belonged in an alien throne room. Remember, Ambassador Hayes said as they made final preparations, let me handle the formal presentations and negotiations. Speak only if directly addressed by the Queen, and keep your responses brief and respectful. The Zephyrians value courtesy above almost everything else. They were escorted through corridors that grew more magnificent with each step. The walls here were not merely crystal, but some form of living stone that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Murals carved into the surface told stories in flowing script and images that seemed to move when viewed peripherally. The ceiling soared impossibly high, lost in misty distances where lights like tiny stars twinkled in patterns that suggested constellations from alien skies. The throne of harmonies was a chamber that defied description. It was vast enough to hold 1,000 beings comfortably, its walls curving up and away until they seemed to merge with the sky itself. The floor was made of crystal, so clear it was like walking on air, with depths that seemed to extend infinitely downward. And at the center of it all rose the crystal throne. The throne appeared to have grown from the planet itself, a massive formation of living crystal that pulsed with slow, steady light. It was both beautiful and alien, clearly designed for a physiology different from humanity's, but somehow managing to suggest power and wisdom that transcended species boundaries. Queen Seraphina sat upon the throne, and Marcus felt his breath catch. She was tall even by Zephyrian standards, her skin displaying patterns of deep purple and gold that spoke of incredible age and wisdom. Her crystalline hair had grown long enough to drape over the arms of the throne, and Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain the accumulated knowledge of her 10,000-year-old civilization. But there was also something wrong. Marcus could see it in the way her skin patterns flickered occasionally, in the slight tremor in her hands, in the way her gaze seemed sometimes to drift to things that weren't there. The queen was indeed ill, and it was more serious than the princess had let on. "Approach, representatives of humanity," the queen said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. Ambassador Hayes led the team forward, stopping at the prescribed distance and offering the deep bow that indicated respect for a sovereign of Seraphina's rank. "Your Majesty, I am Ambassador Catherine Hayes, representing the United Earth Government and all of humanity. We come before you seeking friendship, understanding, and the honor of joining the Galactic Council." Queen Seraphina's gaze swept over the diplomatic team, lingering for a moment on each face. When her eyes met Marcus's, he felt that same strange tingling sensation he had experienced when first arriving on the planet, but stronger now, almost overwhelming. "We have studied your species extensively," the queen said. "Your history is violent, your nature conflicted. You wage war against your own kind, even as you reach for the stars. Why should the Council welcome a race that has not yet learned to live in peace with itself?" It was the same challenge Lord Vayax had presented, but coming from the Queen, it carried the weight of absolute authority. Ambassador Hayes began to respond with the carefully prepared answer they had rehearsed, speaking of humanity's growth, their potential for positive contributions to galactic civilization, their commitment to peaceful coexistence. But as she spoke, Marcus noticed something troubling. The Queen's attention seemed to be drifting, her gaze becoming unfocused. The patterns in her skin were fluctuating in ways that suggested distress or confusion. Whatever illness was affecting her, it was clearly progressing. "Your words are skillfully crafted, Ambassador," the Queen said when Hayes finished. "But words are wind. Actions reveal truth. Tell me, how does humanity propose to prove its worthiness?" This was the moment they had prepared for. Ambassador Hayes began outlining humanity's proposal, a probationary period during which Earth would contribute resources and expertise to Council projects while gradually taking on greater responsibilities. It was a reasonable plan, carefully researched and diplomatically sound. But Marcus could see that something was going wrong. The Queen's skin patterns were becoming more erratic, cycling through colors that didn't match the formal dignity of the occasion. Several of the Zephyrian courtiers were exchanging worried glances, and Princess Lyrelii, standing beside the throne, was displaying colors that Marcus had learned indicated serious concern. Suddenly, the Queen's eyes went wide, and her skin flashed through a sequence of brilliant, chaotic colors. She gripped the arms of the throne, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "The harmony," she gasped. "It's broken. The planetary song is wrong. Something is coming." Chaos erupted in the throne room. Courtiers rushed forward while others backed away in apparent fear. The crystal walls themselves seemed to respond to the Queen's distress, their usual steady glow flickering and fluctuating wildly. That was when the attack came. The first sign was a sound like reality tearing, a harsh, discordant noise that seemed to cut through the air itself. The crystal windows along the far wall exploded inward in a shower of razor-sharp fragments, and through the openings poured creatures out of nightmare. They were insectoid, but wrong, their chitinous bodies gleaming with an oily black sheen that seemed to absorb light. Their limbs ended in claws that sparked with some form of energy, and their multifaceted eyes burned with a malevolent intelligence. Marcus recognized them from the briefings. Devourers, the galaxy's most feared threat, thought to have been extinct for over 1,000 years. The Zephyrian guards reacted with admirable speed, drawing weapons that looked more like musical instruments than tools of war. But their harmonically tuned defenses, designed to work in concert with their planet's natural energies, seemed strangely ineffective against the attackers. Marcus watched in horror as one of the Devourers struck down a guard with a single swipe of its claws. The Zephyrian's skin went completely black before he collapsed, and Marcus realized that the creatures weren't just killing. They were somehow draining the life force from their victims. "Protect the queen," Princess Lyralii shouted, her own skin flashing through warning colors as she drew what appeared to be a crystalline sword. But more devourers were pouring through the broken windows, and the throne room was quickly becoming a battlefield. Marcus saw Ambassador Hayes trying to rally the diplomatic team toward one of the side exits, but their path was blocked by two of the creatures. One of them turned its burning gaze toward the humans, and Marcus felt a chill of absolute terror. That was when instinct took over. Marcus had never considered himself particularly brave. He was a diplomat, a scholar, someone who solved problems with words rather than violence. But watching those nightmare creatures advance toward his colleagues, toward the princess who had shown him such kindness, toward the ailing queen who represented 10,000 years of wisdom and civilization, something fundamental in his human nature rebelled. He grabbed a crystal sculpture from a nearby pedestal. It was heavier than he expected, and its edges were sharp enough to cut. Without thinking, without calculating the odds or considering the consequences, Marcus charged. The devourer turned toward him just as he brought the crystal down with all his strength. The sculpture shattered against the creature's carapace, sending fragments spinning through the air, but it also cracked the thing's exoskeleton. Dark fluid leaked from the wound, and the creature let out a shriek that made Marcus's ears ring. But his attack had only wounded it, not stopped it. The devourer's claws swept toward him, and Marcus knew he couldn't dodge them all. Pain exploded across his chest as the claws raked through his formal robes and into his flesh. He felt his own blood, warm and sticky, beginning to soak through the ceremonial fabric. But somehow, impossibly, he was still standing. The devourer raised its claws for another strike, but before it could attack, Princess Lyralii was there, her crystal sword cutting through the creature's neck in a single, graceful motion. The thing collapsed, its body already beginning to dissolve into the same dark fluid that had leaked from its wound. "You're injured," the princess said, her skin cycling through colors Marcus recognized as concern and something else, something that looked almost like admiration. Marcus looked down at his chest. Blood was indeed seeping through his robes, dark red against the ceremonial blue, but the wounds didn't seem as deep as they had felt. "I'm all right," he said, though his voice came out rougher than he intended. Around them, the battle was turning. The Zephyrian guards, working in coordination with Princess Lyralii, had managed to drive back most of the attackers. But the cost had been terrible. Several guards lay motionless on the crystal floor, their skin drained of all color, and the throne room itself was a ruin of shattered crystal and dark stains. Queen Seraphina sat slumped on her throne, her breathing labored and her skin patterns barely visible. The attack seemed to have worsened whatever condition was affecting her. "What?" Marcus asked, helping the princess support the queen as other courtiers rushed to assist. "Why would the devourers attack now? And how did they get through your defenses?" Princess Lyralii's skin displayed patterns Marcus had never seen before. Dark, complex swirls that spoke of fear and terrible understanding. "They didn't come for conquest," she said quietly. "They came for her. Something about Mother's condition is calling to them, drawing them here. And I think," she paused, looking at Marcus with those luminous violet eyes, "I think your presence here, humanity's arrival, might have been the catalyst." The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. If humanity's diplomatic mission had somehow triggered this attack, if their presence had endangered the Queen and the entire planet. "We should leave immediately," he said, "if we're the cause of this." "No." The voice was weak but unmistakable. Queen Seraphina had rallied enough to speak, though her eyes remained closed. "The young human, he bled for us. His spirit song, pure. Not the catalyst. The solution." Marcus felt the Queen's gaze upon him as she opened her eyes with obvious effort. "Your blood, mixed with ours on the crystal floor. The planetary harmony, it's changing, responding. For the first time in cycles, there's hope in the song. Princess Lyralii was staring at Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. She's right. Can you feel it? The resonance has shifted. Whatever the devourers were being drawn to, it's changing. Marcus realized that he could feel something, a subtle vibration in the air, like the echo of distant music. The crystal walls of the throne room, damaged as they were, seemed to be humming with renewed energy. I don't understand, Marcus said. What's happening? Before anyone could answer, Lord Vaex appeared, his skin displaying colors of shock and something that might have been awe. Your Majesty, he said, bowing deeply to the Queen. The devourers are retreating. All across the planet, they're simply leaving. Our defenses couldn't drive them back, but something has made them abandon their attack. The Queen's gaze fixed on Marcus again. The human, his sacrifice, it has changed the harmony. The planet, it sings of new possibilities now. Marcus looked down at his blood-stained robes, at the crystal floor where indeed his blood had mixed with that of fallen Zephyrians, where fragments of shattered crystal lay scattered like fallen stars. He thought about the harmony bloom in his quarters, about the way the princess's touch had made water glow with golden light, about the strange tingling he had felt since arriving on this world. What does this mean for humanity's application? Ambassador Hayes asked quietly. She had been silent during the attack and its aftermath, but Marcus could see the political implications already forming in her mind. Queen Seraphina struggled to sit up straighter on her throne. It means the Council will welcome Earth with full honors. Your species has already proven its worth. But more than that, she turned her gaze to Marcus again. It means change is coming. To Zephyria, to the Council, to the galaxy itself. And humanity will be at the center of it. As the courtiers worked to clear the throne room and tend to the wounded, Marcus found himself standing beside Princess Lyralii, both of them looking out through the shattered windows at the crystal city beyond. In the distance, he could see ships, the devourer vessels, dark as void, pulling away from the planet and disappearing into hyperspace. You saved my life, the princess said quietly, and possibly my mother's and our entire world. That kind of debt is not easily repaid. Marcus felt his face warming. I just did what anyone would have done. The princess's skin shifted to warm golds mixed with something deeper, richer. No, Marcus Chun of Earth. You did what a human would do. And perhaps that's exactly what we needed. As the second sun reached its zenith, casting the damaged throne room in brilliantly colored light, Marcus realized that everything had changed. Humanity would join the Galactic Council, but not as supplicants seeking approval. They would enter as proven allies, as beings who had spilled their blood for another species without hesitation or calculation. But more than that, something had awakened on Zephyria Prime. In the mixing of his blood with the planet's crystal foundation, in the resonance between human determination and Zephyrian harmony, something new had been born. And at the center of it all stood Princess Lyralii, her violet eyes holding promises and possibilities that Marcus was only beginning to understand 3 days after the Devourer attack. Marcus stood in what had once been the most beautiful room in the palace. The meditation sanctum had been Queen Seraphina's private refuge, a circular chamber where crystalline walls created acoustic patterns that supposedly helped attune consciousness to the planetary harmony. Now those same walls showed hairline fractures that ran like dark veins through the once perfect crystal, and the meditation pool at the center had drained itself, leaving only stained stone. The damage is spreading, Princess Lyralii said, running her fingers along one of the fractured walls. Her skin displayed muted blues and grays, colors Marcus had learned indicated profound sadness. Not just to the palace, but throughout the city. The crystal gardens are losing their resonance. The harmony fountains have fallen silent, and the communication networks are failing one by one. Marcus knelt beside the empty meditation pool, his healed chest still tender beneath fresh robes. The Zephyrian physicians had marveled at his recovery rate. Apparently, human healing factor was considerably faster than their own. But no amount of rapid healing could fix what was happening to Zephyria itself. "It doesn't make sense," he said, touching the stained stone. The Devourers retreated. "Your people said the planetary harmony had been renewed, that my blood somehow helped restore the balance." "And it did," the princess replied, though her tone carried doubt. For a time, Mother's condition stabilized, the attacks stopped, and the planet's song became clearer than it had been in cycles. But now, she gestured helplessly at the deteriorating chamber around them. Now it's as if Zephyria itself is changing, transforming into something we don't recognize. Through the sanctum's tall windows, Marcus could see the capital city spread out below them. What had been an ethereal landscape of living crystal just days ago was now showing signs of the same mysterious decay. Some of the great spires that had reached toward the sky for millennia were dimming, their inner light flickering like dying candles. Others showed the same dark veining that affected the palace walls. "Have the healers learned anything new about the queen's condition?" Marcus asked. The princess's skin shifted to deeper purples. "They're baffled. She's not dying. If anything, her vital signs have improved since the attack. But she spends most of her time in a deep trance, communing directly with the planetary consciousness. She says she's learning something, but she won't tell us what." A commotion from the corridor outside interrupted their conversation. Marcus could hear voices raised in agitation, footsteps moving quickly across crystal floors. Princess Lyraliai's skin flashed to alert colors as she moved toward the door. "Your Highness!" The voice belonged to Captain Zell, one of the palace's senior guards. He burst into the sanctum with barely a pause for protocol, his skin cycling through urgent reds and oranges. "Forgive the intrusion, but you must come immediately. The council representatives are demanding an audience, and Lord Vax." "What about Lord Vax?" the princess asked, her tone carrying royal authority despite her obvious youth. "He's calling for the human delegation to be confined pending a full investigation into their role in the planetary crisis," Captain Zell said, casting an apologetic glance toward Marcus. "He claims they carry some form of contamination that's poisoning Zephyria's natural harmony." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. He had feared something like this might happen as the planet's condition worsened. Fear made people look for someone to blame, and the humans were convenient targets. "Where are my colleagues now?" he asked. "Secure in their quarters, but Lord Vax has guard details posted outside their doors," Captain Zell replied. "He says it's for their protection, but it's clearly house arrest," Princess Lyraliai finished, her skin flashing angry reds. "Take me to them immediately." As they rushed through the palace corridors, Marcus couldn't help but notice how the decay was spreading even here. Walls that had glowed with steady, warm light now flickered unpredictably. Some sections had gone completely dark, while others blazed with harsh, chaotic patterns that hurt to look at directly. They found the diplomatic team's quarters surrounded by Zephyrian guards wearing the formal regalia of Lord Vax's house. The guard's skin displayed the rigid patterns of absolute duty, but Marcus could see uncertainty in their eyes. "Stand aside, Princess Lyraliai commanded." "By what authority do you confine guests of the crown?" The lead guard, a tall Zephyrian whose skin bore the scars of many campaigns, bowed respectfully but didn't move. "Your Highness, we act on the direct orders of Lord Vax, speaking for the emergency council convened to address the crisis affecting our world." "Emergency council?" The princess's skin blazed with colors Marcus had never seen before. Brilliant gold shot through with lightning patterns of silver and white. By whose authority was such a council convened? "The Queen lives, and I am her designated heir. Lord Vax claims the Queen is incapacitated, Your Highness, and that the crisis requires immediate action." Marcus realized what was happening. In the confusion following the Devourer attack and the Queen's mysterious condition, Lord Vax was making a play for power. If he could convince enough of the nobility that the royal family was unable to address the crisis, he might be able to establish himself as regent or even claim the throne outright. Captain Zell, the princess said quietly, how many of the guard remain loyal to the crown? Most, your highness, but Lord Vaex controls the noble guard, and several houses have declared for his emergency council. It's complicated. The door to Ambassador Hayes's quarters opened, and the ambassador herself emerged, flanked by two guards who looked distinctly uncomfortable with their assignment. Her diplomatic composure was intact, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. Your Highness, she said formally, I must protest this treatment of Earth's diplomatic mission. We came here in good faith, and confining us like prisoners is a violation of every principle of galactic law. I'm working to resolve this situation, Ambassador, Princess Lyrelii replied. But I need to understand what's happening to my world first. Perhaps I can help with that, came a new voice. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared behind the ambassador, having apparently convinced her guards to let her join the conversation. Your Highness, I've been studying the readings from our ship's sensors since the attack. I think I know what's causing the changes to your planet. All eyes turned to the xenosociologist. Dr. Vasquez looked tired. They all did, after 3 days of uncertainty and growing tension. But her expression carried the satisfaction of someone who had solved a difficult puzzle. The Devourers weren't just attacking randomly, she continued. They were drawn here by a specific energy signature. Something about Queen Seraphina's condition was broadcasting a signal that they couldn't resist. But when Marcus spilled his blood in defense of your people, something extraordinary happened. She gestured to the walls around them, with their strange new patterns of light and shadow. Zephyrian physiology is uniquely adapted to resonate with your planet's natural energies. But human biology operates on different principles entirely. When Marcus's blood mixed with the crystal matrix of your throne room floor, it created a hybrid resonance frequency that the planet had never experienced before. Princess Lyrelii's skin shifted to colors Marcus was beginning to recognize as intense concentration. You're saying the planet is learning from human biology? More than that, Dar. Vasquez said. I think Zephyria is evolving. The planetary consciousness is incorporating human patterns into its own matrix. That's why the traditional crystal structures are failing. They're being replaced by something new, something that can accommodate both Zephyrian harmony and human chaos. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus knew that chaos was exactly what many species saw as humanity's defining characteristic. Their inability to achieve the kind of perfect order that older civilizations prized. If that's true, Marcus said slowly, then Lord Vaex might be right to be concerned. We really are changing your world, just not in the way anyone expected. Change is not always destruction, Princess Lyrelii said firmly. And evolution is not contamination. The question is whether we can learn to work with these changes rather than fighting them. A new commotion from the corridor interrupted her. This time it was Lord Vaex himself, approaching with a full retinue of guards and several Zephyrians Marcus didn't recognize. The Lord's skin displayed formal patterns of authority, but underneath Marcus could see the harsh reds and blacks of anger and fear. Your Highness, Lord Vaex said, offering a bow that managed to be technically correct while somehow conveying disrespect. The Emergency Council has reached its decision. The human contamination must be purged from Zephyria before it destroys our world entirely. What exactly does that mean? Ambassador Hayes asked, though her tone suggested she feared she already knew. It means the human delegation will be exiled immediately, Lord Vaex replied, and all areas affected by their presence will be cleansed. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. He thought of the harmony bloom in his quarters, of the meditation pool where his blood had mixed with Zephyrian crystal, of all the places he and his colleagues had visited during their time on the planet. You're talking about destroying half the capital city, he said. Better to lose half the city than the entire world, Lord Vaex replied coldly. The Emergency Council has voted. The humans leave within the hour, or they will be forcibly removed. Princess Lyralii stepped forward, her skin now blazing with colors so bright they cast shadows on the corridor walls. I am heir to the Crystal Throne and speaker for Queen Seraphina in her absence. I forbid this action. Your Highness, Lord Vaex said, his own skin shifting to darker, more threatening patterns. The Emergency Council has also voted on the matter of the succession. Given the Queen's incapacitation and your own questionable judgment regarding the human threat, alternative arrangements may be necessary. The threat was clear. Lord Vaex was prepared to remove Princess Lyralii from the line of succession if she continued to oppose him. Marcus realized they were witnessing not just a xenophobic reaction to humanity's presence, but a full-scale coup attempt. Lord Vaex, Marcus said, stepping forward despite the obvious danger. Before you make any final decisions, would you at least listen to what Dr. Vasquez has discovered? If she's right about what's happening to your planet, then exiling us might actually make the situation worse. I have heard quite enough human theories, Lord Vaex replied. Your very presence here has brought nothing but chaos and destruction. Actually, came a new voice, weak but unmistakably authoritative. It has brought hope. Everyone turned to see Queen Seraphina approaching, supported by two palace healers, but clearly walking under her own power. Her skin was pale, displaying barely visible patterns, but her eyes were alert and focused in a way they hadn't been since before the attack. Your Majesty, Princess Lyralii rushed to her mother's side. You shouldn't be out of bed. The healers said the healers understand bodies, my daughter, but not consciousness, the Queen replied gently. And for the past 3 days, I have been communing directly with Zephyria's planetary mind. I have learned much. Lord Vaex's skin shifted to colors Marcus couldn't interpret, but his discomfort was obvious. Your Majesty, with respect, your condition has been unstable. Perhaps you should return to your chambers and allow the council to the council, Queen Seraphina said, her voice gaining strength, has no authority to act in my absence while I live. And I'm very much alive, Lord Vaex. More alive than I have been in cycles. She turned to address the entire group, her gaze lingering on Marcus and his colleagues. Dr. Vasquez is correct. Zephyria is evolving, incorporating new patterns into its consciousness. But she understands only part of the truth. The Queen moved slowly to one of the crystal walls, placing her hand against its fractured surface. Where she touched it, the dark veining suddenly flared with golden light. The planet is not being contaminated, she continued. It is being awakened. For 10,000 years, we have lived in perfect harmony with Zephyria, but it was the harmony of stagnation. We had achieved balance, but at the cost of growth. The golden light was spreading from her touch, running along the fractures in the wall and transforming them from flaws into beautiful new patterns. The Devourers were drawn here because they sensed change coming, the Queen said. They feed on civilizations in transition, on worlds where the old order is breaking down. But they fled when they realized that this change was not decay, but birth. She turned to Marcus, her ancient eyes holding depths that seemed to encompass eons. Your blood, young human, carried the genetic memory of a species that has never stopped evolving. When it mixed with our crystal matrix, it reminded Zephyria what growth feels like, what change can become when it is guided by wisdom rather than fear. Lord Vaex's skin was cycling through confused patterns. Your Majesty, even if this is true, the damage to our infrastructure, our traditional ways, will be rebuilt, the Queen said firmly. Better than before. Stronger than before. Zephyria is not losing its harmony, Lord Vaex. It is learning to sing in new keys. She gestured to the spreading golden light, which was now illuminating the entire corridor in warm, pulsing patterns. The crystal networks are not failing. They are upgrading themselves. The harmony fountains are not breaking down. They're learning to flow in patterns that accommodate both order and chaos. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving on Zephyria: genuine hope. What does this mean for humanity's relationship with your people? Queen Seraphina smiled, the first time Marcus had seen such an expression on her alien features. It means, young Marcus, that your species will not merely join the Galactic Council. You will help us remake it into something that can embrace change rather than fear it. And it means, Princess Lorelei added, her skin now displaying the brilliant golds and whites of joy, that the marriage negotiations can begin. The corridor fell silent except for the soft humming of the newly transformed crystal walls. Marcus felt his brain stutter to a halt. Marriage negotiations? He managed to ask. The princess's skin shifted to warmer tones, and Marcus was almost certain he saw the alien equivalent of a blush. The mixing of blood has created a resonance bond between us. In our culture, such bonds are considered sacred. They represent the union of two spirits in perfect harmony. But I'm human, Marcus protested weakly. And you're a princess, and an alien, and I don't even understand how Zephyrian reproduction works. Queen Seraphina's laugh was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. Love has never been constrained by such practical concerns, young diplomat. And love, I believe, is what will ultimately bridge the gap between our species. Lord Vayex's skin had gone through so many color changes that Marcus was getting dizzy watching it. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. The nobility will never accept. The nobility will adapt, the Queen said calmly, or they will find themselves as obsolete as the old crystal networks. Change is coming, Lord Vayex. The only question is whether we guide it or let it sweep us away. As if in response to her words, the walls around them suddenly blazed with new patterns of light, not the steady, predictable glow of traditional Zephyrian architecture, but complex, ever-changing mandalas that seemed to incorporate mathematical sequences Marcus vaguely recognized from human art and music. Beautiful, Dr. Vasquez murmured, pulling out a scanner to record the phenomenon. It's like the planet is learning to think in human patterns while maintaining its own essential nature. Princess Lyralii moved closer to Marcus, and he could feel that strange tingling sensation again, stronger now than ever before. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. The choice is yours, Marcus Chon of Earth. The resonance bond can be severed if you wish it, but if you choose to embrace it. She paused, her skin cycling through colors that suggested both hope and vulnerability. If you choose to embrace it, you would not just be marrying me. You would be helping to birth a new kind of civilization, one that combines the wisdom of age with the vitality of youth, the harmony of order with the creativity of chaos. Marcus looked around the corridor, at the transformed walls with their impossible beauty, at the queen whose eyes held the accumulated wisdom of 10 millennia, at his colleagues whose faces showed amazement, and something that might have been pride, at Princess Lyralii, whose violet gaze promised adventures and challenges beyond anything he had ever imagined. I have one question, he said finally. Ask, the princess replied. Marcus smiled, feeling a sense of rightness settle into his bones like coming home. When do we start? The corridor erupted in patterns of light so brilliant and joyful that even Lord Vayex's hostile colors were temporarily overwhelmed. And in that moment, Marcus realized that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning 6 months after the Resonance Bond ceremony. Marcus stood in what had once been the palace's traditional council chamber and marveled at how completely everything had changed. The room still maintained its essential Zephyrian architecture, soaring crystal walls that reached toward impossible heights, floors that seemed to extend infinitely downward through layers of transparent stone. But now those surfaces pulsed with hybrid patterns that no pure Zephyrian structure had ever displayed. The walls showed flowing mandalas that incorporated both the mathematical precision of traditional harmony singing and the chaotic beauty of human artistic expression. Where once there had been perfectly ordered crystal formations, Now there grew structures that resembled living coral, branching and spreading in patterns that followed rules no single species could have conceived. The integration is proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections, Dr. Vasquez reported, her scanner showing readings that would have been impossible to interpret just months ago. The planetary consciousness isn't just adapting to human thought patterns. It's creating entirely new forms of expression that neither of our species could achieve alone. Princess Lyralii, though Marcus still struggled with the proper title for someone who is simultaneously his wife, his diplomatic counterpart, and heir to a galactic empire, moved through the transformed space with the fluid grace that had first captivated him. But now her movements carried an additional quality, a subtle rhythm that seemed to match his own heartbeat. The resonance bond had proven to be far more than a symbolic union. Over the past months, Marcus had discovered that he could sense Lyralii's emotional state even when they were separated by great distances. More remarkably, she seemed to be developing an intuitive understanding of human thought processes that allowed her to navigate the complexities of Earth culture with unprecedented skill. The Galactic Council representatives arrive tomorrow, she said, her skin displaying the complex patterns that had become her signature. Traditional Zephyrian royal purples shot through with what Marcus had come to recognize as human-influenced golds and silvers. Are you prepared for their questions about the integration project? Marcus consulted the datapad that contained his notes for the presentation. The past 6 months had seen changes that went far beyond Zephyria Prime. As word of the planet's transformation spread throughout Council space, delegations from dozens of species had arrived to observe what was being called either the greatest evolutionary breakthrough in galactic history or the most dangerous contamination event ever recorded. As prepared as anyone can be for explaining the impossible, he replied. How do you tell representatives from species that have remained essentially unchanged for millions of years that evolution doesn't have to stop? That stagnation isn't the same thing as stability? Through the chamber's new hybrid windows, crystal formations that had somehow learned to bend light in ways that revealed previously invisible spectra, Marcus could see the capital city spreading out below them. The transformation there had been even more dramatic than in the palace. The ancient crystal spires now grew alongside structures that looked like they had been designed by committees of artists, architects, and theoretical physicists working in perfect harmony. The Zephyrian citizens had adapted to the changes with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The younger generations had embraced the new hybrid architecture with delight, learning to shape crystal formations in patterns that would have been impossible under the old harmonic constraints. The older citizens were more cautious, but even the most traditional had been forced to admit that the enhanced capabilities were undeniably beneficial. The preliminary reports from the outer colonies are encouraging, Lyralii noted, reviewing her own set of data. The resonance effect is spreading naturally through the crystal networks, but slowly enough that communities can adapt at their own pace. It was true. The changes that had begun in the throne room, where Marcus had first bled for Zephyria, had propagated through the planet's interconnected crystal matrix like ripples in a vast pond. But rather than overwhelming the existing systems, the new patterns seemed to integrate themselves gradually, allowing Zephyrian society to evolve rather than simply collapse and rebuild. A chime from the chamber's communication system announced an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display that materialized showed Queen Seraphina, though she was calling from the other side of the planet, where she had been working with a team of hybrid architects to design the new council embassy. Marcus, Lyralii, the Queen said, her image flickering slightly as the transmission traveled through the still-adapting networks. I wanted to inform you that the advanced team from the Ethereal Collective has just arrived. They're perplexed. Marcus wasn't surprised. The Ethereals were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, gaseous beings whose consciousness existed as patterns of electromagnetic energy within carefully maintained cloud formations. Their entire civilization was based on the principle of absolute stability. They had achieved perfect equilibrium with their environment over 10 million years ago and viewed any form of change as inherently dangerous. What's their primary concern? Lyralii asked, though her skin pattern suggested she already suspected the answer. They claim that what we're doing here violates the fundamental principles of galactic civilization, the Queen replied. According to their preliminary report, the integration of chaotic elements into stable systems represents a potential threat to every advanced species in the galaxy. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The Ethereals commanded enormous respect within the Galactic Council, and their opposition to the Zephyrian transformation could influence the opinions of dozens of other species. Have they agreed to tour the integration sites? He asked, reluctantly. But they insist on using their own environmental suits rather than risking direct exposure to what they're calling the chaos contamination. I'm afraid their minds are already made up. After the transmission ended, Marcus and Lyralii made their way to the palace's new hybrid gardens. These had become Marcus's favorite place to think, a vast space where traditional Zephyrian harmony singing had been combined with human concepts of landscape design to create something that was both alien and familiar. Trees that chimed like bells in the wind grew alongside plants that seemed to respond to the emotions of visitors, their leaves shifting color and texture based on the resonance patterns they detected. Streams of water flowed in impossible spirals, while flowering vines created living sculptures that told stories in languages neither species had possessed before the integration. Are you worried about the ethereal response? Lyralii asked as they walked along pathways that seemed to grow beneath their feet. Marcus considered the question carefully. Over the months since their bonding, he had learned that his wife, and he still felt a thrill every time he thought that word, valued complete honesty above diplomatic politeness. Yes and no, he said finally. I'm worried about the political implications if they convince other species that we represent a threat. But I'm not worried about the integration itself. What we're doing here, what Zephyria is becoming, it's not contamination or chaos. It's synthesis. They paused beside one of the garden's central features, a fountain where water flowed upward in helical patterns while crystal formations grew in real time, shaped by the harmonic resonance between the flowing water and the visitor's presence. As Marcus watched, the growing crystals began to incorporate geometric patterns that echoed the mathematical sequences he had been studying in his preparation for the council presentation. The old way of thinking about galactic civilization was based on the assumption that advancement meant achieving stasis, he continued. Find the perfect balance, eliminate all variables, and then maintain that state forever. But humans never learned how to stop evolving. We're a species that thrives on change, on adaptation, on finding new solutions to new problems. Lyralii's skin shifted to the warm golds that indicated deep thought. And now Zephyria is learning to think the same way. The planetary consciousness isn't trying to return to its previous state. It's excited about exploring new possibilities. A commotion from the direction of the palace interrupted their conversation. Looking back toward the main complex, Marcus could see several atmospheric craft descending toward the landing platforms. The ships had the distinctive appearance of council diplomatic vessels, sleek, functional designs that prioritized efficiency over aesthetic appeal. The advanced teams, Lyralii observed, they're arriving ahead of schedule. As they made their way back toward the palace, Marcus noticed that the integration effects were more pronounced than they had been even that morning. The crystal pathways now showed subtle patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with their footsteps. The air itself carried a faint harmonic resonance that made him feel more alert, more connected to everything around him. The main reception hall was already bustling with activity when they arrived. The advanced teams from several council species were being greeted by palace staff, and Marcus could see the various delegates' reactions to the transformed environment. The ethereal representative was immediately obvious. A containment suit filled with swirling patterns of colored gas, moving with the precise, controlled motions that characterized their species. The being's electromagnetic field was carefully shielded to prevent any interaction with the surrounding crystal matrix, and Marcus could see the faint distortion patterns that indicated active environmental filters. Also present were delegates from the Kythera collective, insectoid beings whose black, geometric exoskeletons seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in perfect synchronization, their multifaceted eyes taking in every detail of the hybrid architecture with mechanical precision. The third group Marcus didn't recognize immediately, but their general humanoid structure and the way they seemed to phase slightly in and out of visible reality suggested they might be representatives of the quantum assembly, a species that existed partially in parallel dimensions. "Your Highness, Ambassador Chun," said Captain Zell, approaching with a formal bearing that indicated he was speaking in his official capacity. "The advanced teams are requesting an immediate preliminary briefing on the integration status." They seemed concerned. Marcus could see why. To beings whose entire civilizations were based on maintaining perfect stasis, the constantly changing patterns of the hybrid architecture would appear deeply unsettling. What seemed like beautiful evolution to him, and Lyralii might look,